Welcome to an India Today special broadcast that comes to you from the West Bank, the Palestinian West Bank. I'm Gaurav Sawant. There is tremendous tension in this part of the area. Now, this is Palestinian territory, and the Israeli forces have moved in a big way in the past 24 hours. At least 70 suspected Hamas fighters have been taken into custody in the West Bank. It's ever since the 7th of October, the number of arrests in the West Bank, in the Palestinian territory, has crossed over 700. Even as we speak, there are protesters who've assembled after the Friday prayers. Look around me. Ambulances are already in place. These are ambulances that are coming in place. Youngsters with Palestinian flags all around are in this area. Emergency workers already in place because there already has been some incidents have taken place. The Palestinian youth here are protesting against the Israeli forces and their actions at the Gaza Strip. And over the course of the next half hour, I will get you all details of the rising anger in the Palestinian West Bank. In fact, the apprehension is this could well be the second front that Israel has to deal with after the Gaza Strip.
Israel-Hamas war gets bigger. Theatre of war expands. Now, Lebanon and Palestine borders on fire. India Today covers all war fronts.
Trouble which is expected in this part.
The most exhaustive coverage with Gaurav Sawant in the war zone.
Today is reporting from ground zero. This is Palestinian West Bank. There are several enclaves and settlements here where you have the Israeli population also. In fact, of the 300,000 people who live here, 86% are Palestinians, about 14% are Israeli settlers who have, very well protected enclaves in this area. It's almost like a military cantonment, and anyone who attempts to come close to the fortification, there's firing, tear gas shells are fired, and protesters here also come with gas masks. Where we are right now, this is the central square, at the central roundabout at Ramallah. This is the Ramallah Bira area, and this is where the protesters are slowly gathering. I want to show you these images of youngsters waving the Palestinian flag. They've assembled here. Ambulances are already out. There are separate enclaves where the Palestinians can go, areas where only Israelis stay, and of course there are then those areas where both Palestinians and Israelis can go, but then there is a lot of security in place. But right now, tension palpably high. I want to show you a report. Just when we reached the Palestinian West Bank, there wasn't a soul in sight, but the situation is fast deteriorating. It's taking a turn for the worse as Israeli forces move in a bigger way to ensure that all Hamas sleeper cells and fighters are immediately taken into custody. More ambulances are now coming in because as the protesters come close, Israeli forces target those protesters, and ambulances are then rushed in to take those protesters to the nearest hospital. We bring you this ground report.
India Today is reporting from ground zero at the West Bank, and it's Friday. After the Friday prayers, there is some trouble which is expected in this part of the territory. In fact, the Israeli Defense Forces, they've been very aggressive. The Israeli Defense Forces have arrested more than 70 suspected Hamas fighters in this area. And this has happened just in the past 24 hours. The Israeli forces swooped in, made those arrests, and took those suspects away. But apart from that, the expectation is hours from now, as people assemble for Friday afternoon prayers at the mosque here. This is where India Today will be reporting from. There will be clashes with the Israeli forces. The apprehension is after Gaza Strip, this could be the second front where the Israeli forces could be engaging with the rising anger amongst the Palestinian youth. India Today is the first channel to be reporting from so deep inside the West Bank. So we were at Ramallah, now we've come to Beira. This is where you have some Israeli settlements, and in these settlements are being targeted by the Palestinian youth, who say that the targeting, the airstrikes that have been carried out at more than 100 locations. The situation remains extremely tense, extremely grim. The images are being broadcast in every home live. But if you notice the road around me, every shop is shut, every house, there are people who are barricaded inside. Watch, there is an apprehension, there is this fear, there is this apprehension that the Israeli forces will come in a big way and start making those arrests, especially of the youth. But there are some who say that this is the time to defy the Israeli forces. This is the time for the youth to come out on the streets and stand with the people in Gaza. And you have to be very careful what you say, what you speak when you are here at the West Bank, because the situation, one, very volatile, two, very, very tense. Now, this is a place which is home to close to 30 lakh people, 86% Palestinians, 14% Israeli settlers. And there have been instances of violence, of targeted attacks that have been taking place. And that is why the Israeli forces are also deployed in larger numbers. We're getting to where this apprehension is that there could be violence. And again, in the West Bank, this could well be the second frontier. Israel is now fighting a war on multiple fronts against Hamas at Gaza Strip. Hamas investing extensively even here in West Bank. Several Hamas fighters have been taken into custody here at the West Bank, where I am right now, and also with the Hezbollah on the Lebanon border. So as far as Israeli forces are concerned, they could be facing trouble on multiple fronts, from Gaza to West Bank to the Lebanon border. This is a conflict which is Hamas versus Israeli forces, but Hamas has also been trying to make major inroads in the West Bank, in Ramallah, in Beira, where I am right now. And, we were advised by the Israeli forces not to stay at any one location for too long, because the apprehension is that while the Palestinians here in the West Bank want peace and development, and you're looking at, those benefits of peace and development in this part of the West Bank. Watch around me, big malls, big shops, well-to-do people. You have massive showrooms, you have KFC, all of that is here. Big automobile showrooms also here. But again, a very densely populated, colony or locality here. This is where the Palestinian Authority also have their office. The Prime Minister's office wasn't far from where we were reporting from earlier today. But the Hamas is not restricted just to Gaza Strip now. Hamas has increasingly tried to make major inroads here, and 70 Hamas fighters were arrested in the past 24 hours. Close to 500 have been arrested since the 7th of October incident that had taken place. So right now, this is an extremely volatile zone. This is virtually this is a tinderbox. Even the West Bank is becoming a tinderbox, and Israeli forces are deployed in adequate numbers to ensure that this doesn't emerge as the second front. The apprehension is, after Gaza, West Bank could emerge as the second front. This is a very well-developed part of the West Bank where I am right now. This is an area which also has open areas. It has, so for example, right behind me, this is a mall where you see some shops of bridal wear, some offices. You also see the Palestinian flag flying high on top at this central roundabout, that petrol pump that you see right behind me. And there are signs of protest, but what you see on top of that hill beyond the fence, now there are some Israeli settlements here, and that's a bone of contention. Look, these are people who are going about their daily lives, their jobs. Watch, their big cars in this area. So whether you have the latest Volkswagen, we have come in here in one of the cars, because Israeli automobiles do not come in here, or they're at least advised not to. When we came to Jerusalem. From Jerusalem, we crossed the border, or that picket fence, if I may, and our Israeli driver didn't come this side. He said, no, it's not safe. He said, I will stay right here and wait for you. So I crossed over with some foreign journalists on the other side, and then we got into a car of a Palestinian taxi driver, a Palestinian taxi driver driving the latest Skoda, the latest model of Skoda. So this is a well-to-do place. There are big houses. There's, one of the offices we went to, we interacted with a local journalist, and it's a plush office, overlooks the mountain here. You can see parts of Jerusalem from some places. So this is quite different. But though it is thickly populated, population density immense. I mean, 30 lakh people live in a narrow land bank. And again, while 86% are Palestinian, 13% or 14% are Israeli settlers in this area. And there is now a spike in tension between the Israeli settlers and the Palestinians here at West Bank. There are various pockets of the Israelis inside the West Bank, and they are protected by the Palestinian forces. So let me show you more images of cars and people at this crossing. But right now, I'm also trying to head to the place where clashes are expected between the Israeli forces and the Palestinian youth, and very, very angry Palestinian youth here. Again, as I was coming in, the advice was do not stay at any one location for too long, because this is where word gets around here very quickly. And the Hamas fighters could also learn that, there are foreign journalists here, and then they could come and target, people in any one location. So we come to a location, we shoot there, and then we move to the next location to be able to get you a wider perspective of what's happening here.
And where I am now, protesters have started assembling. Watch around me. You have a number of protesters and children. The parents, they've all assembled here. There are youth who are standing all over this, all around here, waiting to protest. Some of these roads have now been barricaded. So you look at the protesters, they are here in numbers, health workers who are there, and this is the road that's been barricaded completely. And there on the other side, you have ambulances that are lined up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ambulances already lined up here, because any time now with protesters assembling here, they will try and march towards that Israeli settlement that you see behind me. That wall, behind that wall is the Israeli settlement, and this is where the protesters come in large numbers to protest. That is where the moment they come, as the Israelis put it, dangerously close to that fence, the Israeli security forces, they either fire tear gas shells or open fire with rubber bullets. The protesters here, of course, say that there are times that real bullets have also been used, injuring people. In fact, it's not just that. The apprehension amongst the Israeli forces is that a very large number of Hamas fighters have infiltrated in this area, and this is where there is another pocket of resistance that is building up. Now, Israel wants to stop that, and that is why it's targeting some of these youth here. But not everybody in this part of Palestine wants to take on the Israeli forces. In fact, they are actually saying that they'd rather live in peace, they'd rather live in harmony and hope for a peaceful negotiated settlement. But Hamas, of course, is making deeper inroads, is the apprehension. But for Israel, the second front is already the Israel-Lebanon border. In fact, just about an hour ago, Israeli forces used airstrikes to target some of the Hezbollah strongholds. Israel says that Hezbollah fighters had targeted some of their posts, destroyed some of their communication equipment. Based on very specific intelligence, they mounted a swift counterattack. India Today's Ashraf Vani is on ground zero in Lebanon, and he's filed this report.
We are in a deflated position, we are in a safe position a little bit, but just 50 meters away from us, between these two sides, continuous exchange of fire there. We are able to watch it because of the height we have. Look, again, machine gun fire. This was machine gun fire. Like continuous machine gun fire. You can see tracers going. Continuous fire, continuous. Machine gun and arty fire. Look, from both sides. Both sides.
The exchange of fire on the Lebanon border is getting more regular, a sign that Israel could have to contend with a two-front war if it goes ahead with its ground invasion of Gaza. Many Hezbollah locations in South Lebanon have already been damaged in Israel's mortar shelling. Hezbollah too is striking back at Israeli army's positions from South Lebanon.
This tension is not only restricted to the land, but the Hezbollah fighters on Thursday fired a missile on the naval base in the Mediterranean Sea at Nakura, which is also behind me, visible in the visuals. There was not any report of damage in that naval base of Israel in the Mediterranean Sea.
While Hamas continues to remain a major threat, the Israeli Defense Force has warned the Lebanon-based Hezbollah group to stay away from the ongoing war.
So right now we're still striking Hamas infrastructure and senior leadership in Gaza. We are very, very determined. We're acting based on intelligence and slowly going after Hamas targets. And we're going to go to get to each and every one of them. We've asked civilians to move south from Gaza City, south of Wadi Gaza. We've declared a safe zone in the Moassi on the beach. And we are moving on our operational planning.
In some parts of Lebanon, civilians have already been evacuated in anticipation of hostilities.
This town with the red rooftops, this is Metula, and if you see the tower behind this, single big tower, high tower, that is Lebanon. And you can see the signboard saying Metula that side. So the Metula is there, and just 50 meters from there, the Lebanese territory starts, and that big tower or building you see, white building, is in Lebanon.
The US Embassy in Lebanon has already urged its citizens to make plans to depart as soon as possible. Clashes at the Israel-Lebanon border have now raised fears of a wider war. With Gaurav Sawant, Rajesh Pawar and Ashraf Wani, Bureau Report, India Today.
So that was India Today's Rajesh Pawar reporting from the Israeli side of the Lebanon border. We also have Ashraf Wani reporting from Ground Zero in Lebanon. In fact, India Today has the biggest team of reporters on Ground Zero to get you a 360-degree perspective on this story. I am currently at the West Bank, Palestinian territory, where there is rising anger over Israel's targeting of Hamas strongholds at the Gaza Strip. Not everybody here supports Hamas. At the same time, they're saying that too many civilians are being killed in this crossfire between Hamas and the Israeli forces. But what is this fight all about? According to Israel, it started with 1,400 of their civilians being massacred by Hamas on the 7th of October. But this is a fight that the Palestinians say has been on for longer as they assemble here to protest Israel's targeting of civilians at the Gaza Strip. I want to cut across to India Today's Akshita Nandagopal, who gives us a brief history of the problem that is being faced here by people on Ground Zero.
The name Palestine comes from the word Philistines, which was in use many years ago, from 12th century BCE, which is when the Greeks actually owned a portion of land in what is now known as Palestine. Now, 1,000 years later, the Romans also used it when they, in fact, stretched their empire into what is now known as modern-day Syria. So for almost 2,000 years, the word Palestine wasn't used, and this despite the fact that it was very much in Arabic since the advent of Islam. In 1918, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed after the First World War and Britain had the mandate over the land, they brought Palestine back into use as separate from the adjoining territory of Jordan. By this time, there was already a sense of conflict brewing between the Arabs and the Jews. And that's courtesy an idea that was proposed by Napoleon over a century ago, that he'd give a certain portion of land as a safe house, as a territory for Jews. And that's where the seeds of this conflict essentially began. The British then tried to use it to their advantage to get support against the Ottomans. And so they too promised a Jewish territory in the Arab land. Palestine had become a distinct political entity for the first time in centuries. But they also realized one thing, that in this conflict between Palestinian Arabs and Palestinian Jews, the decision would be based on obviously the number with regards to the population and who owned more land. So that's why while the British were there, the region still saw this kind of a conflict playing out. The Jewish immigration was constant into this area. But despite that, the numbers were clearly skewed in favor of the Palestinian Arabs. Then came another world war. And as Hitler occupied Europe, began systematically killing Jews, Palestine once again became the promised land where shiploads of Jewish refugees began arriving. By the end of the war, the race was on to secure a Jewish nation on the shores of the Mediterranean. By this time, there were Jewish militias that had formed and Arabs had started to arm in self-defense. In 1947, the United Nations stepped in. They came up with a partition plan for Palestine known as Resolution 181. It led to the conflict only escalating. There was a civil war that broke out in Palestine, and so for obvious reasons, the British didn't want to get their hands dirty. They wanted out. And despite the mess, the sovereign state of Israel came into being in May 1948. And immediately, Israel was at war with its Arab neighbors. A war that Israel won. So by this time, the areas, the territories of Palestine and Israel were very clearly marked out and distinct. Palestine was West Bank and Gaza. But this clearly remained a thorn for Israel. So another war broke out, this time in 1967, when Israel occupied Palestine, occupied West Bank and Gaza. In 1964, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, had been formed in Cairo in Egypt. And under the leadership of Yasser Arafat, the PLO took up the challenge to wage constant war against the state of Israel. For the next 2.5 decades, the PLO continued to wage war against Israel. Finally, however, there was a breakthrough in 1987. That's when the PLO finally agreed and adopted the UN resolution, which meant they finally recognized the state of Israel. Matters improved and it seemed to be on the mend, but it was short-lived. By 2002, the region was again in terrible conflict. The second intifada or uprising had begun. In 2007, Israel imposed a blockade in Gaza. In 2008, Israel sent in its army into the Strip. A peace was brokered that lasted a mere 4 years. And Israel once again attacked Gaza in 2012 and once again in 2014 when bombs rained down on Gaza. A ceasefire was finally declared in August 2014. One that lasted till May 2021. And then for 11 days, there was no peace. Gunshots, arson and missiles turned this promised land into a war zone. What started with a conflict over the Al-Aqsa Mosque settled with a fragmented peace dotted with frequent firing and stone pelting till 7th October 2023, the day that war once again broke out in this region, the day that the cancer of Middle East once again turned this land into a boulevard of broken promises.
And I want to walk amongst the crowd for a moment. the situation here remains extremely tense. The youth have assembled here in large numbers as we walk around and show you the anger on the streets. There is anger on the streets at this point of time. Sorry? So we're just walking amongst the crowd to show you how there are youngsters and they've got just slingshots in their hand. With these slingshots, they're taking on the Israeli forces behind those barricades behind me. So youth have assembled here in large numbers. There are women. There are those who have the Palestinian flag. For example, this family, I want to show you these images with the Palestinian flag. These people are here. In fact, in some instances, you have people who have gas masks. They're wearing gas masks because the Israeli forces often use tear gas shells. And from top of buildings, various people from top of buildings also, they're looking at whatever is happening here. An attempt was made to set these petrol tankers on fire. But this is the line. Nobody's permitted to go beyond this line right now. But anger rises as ambulances come in large number and take those who've been injured in these attacks to hospital. Look behind me. So ambulances are now lining up all along this road as people are taken to hospital with slingshots. They're taking on the Israeli forces behind those high walls. The anger is at the targeting of civilians in Gaza. But what's happening at other borders? What has Israel's offensive in the Gaza Strip been like, especially when churches have also been targeted, which Hamas says has been done by Israeli forces? The Israeli forces, of course, say Hamas is also using information warfare in a very big way. No hospital was targeted by Israeli forces, but Hamas said that it was Israel that targeted the hospital, and people suddenly moving to a side. Let's get you more in this report.
Another night of bombing in Gaza. A historic church sheltering civilians is struck by a deadly blast. Many were killed, scores injured in yet another attack as Israeli forces gear up for ground assault. Hamas is blaming Israeli airstrikes, but Tel Aviv has vehemently denied any role in the attack on the church, one of the oldest in the world.
After the Greek Orthodox Church was targeted, the Palestinian authorities are blaming Israel for it. Israel, of course, says it does not target either hospitals or schools or sensitive locations. It has not targeted any of these locations, even at a time when Israel has accused Hamas of using places very close to either a hospital or schools, generally a no-go area for Israeli defense forces, to mount rocket and missile attacks on Israel and targeting Israeli civilians. So this war of words and information war is only set to intensify.
The survivors of the attack narrated the horror, how they believed they were safe in the church when they really weren't.
They came here to escape the airstrikes and the destruction. They thought they were safe here. The destruction followed them.
Rescuers dug through the rubble in hope that they would find survivors. Many are believed to be trapped under the debris. No fuel, no power, no proper water supply. Gazans endured yet another night of bombing amid uncertainty on whether Rafah crossing will open, allowing humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza before the imminent ground invasion. With Gaurav Sawant in Palestine, Bureau Report, India Today.
And now protesters are coming here in larger numbers as our ambulances take those who've been injured to hospital. The protesters, after Friday prayers, they assemble at this central roundabout in Ramallah and protest against the Israeli forces. Now, there is also this blockade of the Gaza Strip. Israel's not permitting any resources, any food, water or emergency supplies, medicines to get to Gaza Strip from the Israeli crossing. They say that we have about 200 of our people who are being held hostage by the Hamas. They need to be released first. But US President President Joe Biden succeeded in ensuring that there is one humanitarian corridor that's open from the Egyptian side. That's the southern side of the Gaza Strip from the Rafah border. And 6 trucks, of course it's a drop in the ocean, but 6 trucks carrying food, water and medicines have been permitted. Will that happen in the next several hours or days remains to be seen, but a lot more needs to be done. There is also this hope that the Americans have from information that we've been able to pick up that at least some American citizens and British citizens would be permitted to leave through the Egyptian borders and then join some of the warships that are there and be taken to safety. I get you more in this report from the West Bank.
Truckloads of stockpiled aid are waiting to be transported into Gaza from Egypt through the Rafah crossing. Security forces say that machinery to repair roads has already been sent through in preparation, as more than 100 trucks await. Rafah, the only crossing not controlled by Israel, has been out of operation since the first days of the conflict. But the United States and Egypt have been pushing for a deal with Israel. On Wednesday, the White House said it had been agreed for up to 20 trucks to pass through, with hopes for more later, so long as those supplies do not reach Hamas. Most of Gaza's 2.3 million residents depend on aid. According to the United Nations, before the conflict started on October 7th, about 100 trucks daily were providing humanitarian relief to the enclave. But the upcoming arrival of aid is unlikely to raise spirits. Airstrikes and acute shortages of food, medicine and water are worsening the humanitarian situation in the Strip. In the city of Khan Yunis, the wounded, which includes UN workers and children alike, are being brought into hospital. These people have been injured as a result of airstrikes hitting a house on Thursday morning. Also in the city, those displaced from their homes have sought refuge in a wedding hall. This lady is among them and says the hall should be used for celebration, not as a place to mourn. Israel has said it will continue a blockade of humanitarian aid from Israel into Gaza until hostages held by Hamas are returned. Israel's bombardment and siege of Gaza is in retaliation for a devastating Hamas incursion into Israel on October 7th, during which 1,400 people were killed and hostages taken. Israel and Egypt have upheld a blockade of Gaza since Hamas took control of the territory in 2007, tightly controlling the movement of goods and people.